welcome to the stage a guy who has fun with food for a living. He is Dr. Irwin Adam. He is a food futurist and a funster. He's a technologist, a researcher, and an inventor of edible clouds and dancing soup. He works on flavor trends. He called, for example, the uptick in social interest in kimchi and bitter cocktails. And best of all, as far as I'm concerned, he's doing research and looking into the impact of sound on taste. This is Dr. Irwin Adam. Everyone?
Thanks very much.
Welcome.
All right. Well, it's amazing to be here, and for, I think, one of the first times ever speaking in Toronto. My name is Dr. Irwin Adam. I am a food futurist. I am an engineer. I'm a scientist. But I spend a lot of my time thinking about food experience. Wonderful. And now I have one of these. And this really is the future right here, I promise. But yeah, it's very exciting to know that, we saw those burgers, and to know that the future of food is in fact juicy and tasty and not going to be a little pill that we just kind of pop in order to eat. So on my journeys exploring the future of food, I've had the opportunity to travel quite a bit and really look under the covers at a lot of these things that are happening in food. I've been to some of the research laboratories of the world's largest food and beverage companies. I've found myself not too far from Toronto in the fields of some of our dairy farms here in Ontario. I've made my way into virtual reality studios and hack labs where people are reimagining how to put together a food experience. But fundamentally, one of the most impactful food experiences for myself was this past fall, going back to the former Soviet Republic of Georgia, where my family is originally from, and spending time in the ancient vineyards and looking at the processes of how wine has been made forever. But one of the linking thematics between all of these experiences has been very simple: the mouth. Your mouth is not only a tool to transform yourself and your physiology, it's also a tool to transform the world around you. Fundamentally, each of the decisions you make every day around the things you consume transform everything else. And our cumulative decision-making drives everything in the world, from technology development to social policy to environmental changes, and ultimately the evolution of humanity. Food initially is often perceived as a way of just to take care of one another, right? We know we feed the ones we love, we make food for them, we share food with them, and that becomes a part of them. That becomes their hair, their skin, the energy they need in order to do their daily lives. Food also has an incredible ability to act as a platform for storytelling. We know about the histories of food and how they've come across over hundreds of years in order to develop cuisines of today. We share narratives. We share who we are with one another when we make food. But our interactions with food also have significant impacts on the world around us. We know we've cut down rainforests. We know we've endangered the oceans around us. But we've also pursued higher pursuits in science because of food. We've driven research into nutrition, physiology, biology. We've learned how to genetically modify organisms. We've actually done a lot of really incredible things. But again, tying it all together is our mouth. Every single one of us is a contributor to the future of food. And the reason for that is we all eat. So every single aspect of every decision you make in order to eat transforms everything around us and drives the transition towards this future of food. So I find the conversation around the future of food gets a bit convoluted. And for us, we use a lot of that conversation around the future of food to drive the experiences that we create. So I find it very helpful to divide it into 3 parts. The first part being a question about what is food? A second part, thinking about how we make food. And a third part, starting to understand a little bit more about how we experience food. And really, that's where our studio focuses. So we've already heard quite a bit about plant proteins and the urgency with which we're looking to diversify our protein portfolios in order to minimize the impact that we have on the environment. But beyond protein sources from plants, people have already been investigating and developing new concepts in businesses and snack food products around insects. Over 2 billion people today in the world consume insects as a primary protein source or a supplementary protein source. Right now, it's been explored how to drive increased insect consumption in Western markets as well, looking at how we can move away from the intensive farming operations around animals and look towards something a little bit more efficient using insects. When we continue along this line of thought and we start reimagining what food could actually be, we find one of the biggest and more interesting categories of what if we actually start eating the waste that we create, right? Over 20 billion disposable cups are used every year in the United States. That's 20 billion disposable cups that are just thrown away. What if we could actually consume these cups? And this is a product that is designed exactly around that. A good friend and cross-modalist and chef from the UK once challenged me as well. Well, we start thinking about how we can apply technology to transform food, and we start looking for all these new food products, but often it's right under our noses. When you look at how we grow broccoli, so this picture that you're looking at behind me right now is predominantly made up of leaves. All these leaves go to waste. The only product actually being consumed is that small head of broccoli in the middle. So what if we reimagine the things we grow in order to be more efficient and actually grow things that we eat? So these are the thoughts that go through my mind all the time when I'm thinking about the future of food. And that leads to kind of a second broader area around how we make food. Right now, we're seeing the integration of robotics and drones within the agricultural environment. We're looking at how farmers can increase their efficiencies in producing food by implementing automation. What does it mean when farms of tomorrow are completely run by drones or robots? There are numerous projects that explore closed system farming. What if we move farming away from the fields and actually into the cities and start looking at how we can have modules right here downtown that will produce all the food that our communities need? Pushing a little further, what happens when we actually start culturing our food in the laboratory? One of the high-impact products that's being explored right now and has actually already been developed is lab-cultured milk. So what does it mean when you do away with a whole dairy farm and now you actually take all those individual proteins that make up milk and you grow them inside yeast? And you just run a fermentation as you might with beer or wine in order to generate all of these proteins. And then you combine them back together to create milk. We're seeing a similar exploration in meat. So not only are we looking to shift our protein sources to insects or to plant-based proteins, we're also exploring what it means to grow a steak in the laboratory. Is this the same food that we've been eating till today? And more new technologies are being applied within food. 3D printing has really found its way into so many industries, hasn't necessarily found a home run in food, but really is being explored as a way to create personalized food or beautifully architected foods. And so I'm going to jump now to the experience around food, and really what motivates our studio to do the work that we do, and share a few of our projects. So fundamental to every piece of work that we produce is this notion of creating food consciousness through delight. So every piece that you'll see really looks to evoke something in the mind that causes pause and makes you pause for a second and think, hey, what is this? And it's those little moments where we find individuals can move away from kind of just automated consumption and actually begin to be a little bit more mindful and conscious around their food. So one of our earliest projects was this edible cloud. The edible cloud is a cloud that you can pour, you can sip, you can drink, but it was premised upon the idea of deconstructing a very familiar beverage product. So we asked ourselves, what does it mean to strip away all of the usual notions of beverage and maintain flavor while transitioning form? And that's where we landed on the edible cloud. This was also designed in order to evoke the physiology of eating. We know that when we chew, we generate tiny aerosol particles that go up through our nasal passage and stimulate the olfactory neurons. And it's these olfactory neurons that differentiate the 10 to 20,000, if not millions, of different flavors that we can actually understand. And pretty interesting is that those olfactory neurons are the shortest distance from the outside world to the middle of our brain. And they gather within the center of our brain, within the olfactory bulb. And even more interesting to that is the olfactory bulb happens to be right next door to the memory cortex. And this is part of why we have such strong associations between smell, flavor, and memory. One of the projects that Moses mentioned is this project we did around sound and soup, or sound and beverage. And for us, it was really exploring how to create an interactive experience around something that would normally be perceived as mundane. And in the initial iteration of this, we had a dome experience, actually here on King West, where we had 80 guests seated at tables, and the dome went dark. And suddenly a spotlight turns on a drummer, and he starts building a rhythm. And as he builds the rhythm, bowls of soup and broth are served across all these tables. And as he builds further and further and further, the bowls of soup actually start to come to life, and each individual bowl becomes a fountain in front of the guest. And for us, these little moments of, wow, what was that, are the moments we're looking to trigger. We want to make people think. Another experimental piece from the studio that we've run several times publicly is this project around tasting data. We live in a world that is full of so much big data that we can't necessarily comprehend through traditional ways. So our hypothesis was, what happens if we add extra layers of comprehension to data and start training individuals to associate specific types of data with specific types of taste? And so what you see here is actually an original prototype for this system, and that is colored water, just to make it easier to understand what's going on. But what would happen is, in this instance, we would gather data from Twitter, and we would associate each of those tweets with different sentiments. And those sentiments would then individually be associated with different flavor profiles or taste profiles. And then when you wanted to taste whatever's going on in the Twitterverse, you would basically hit go, and it would pour you a beverage that's proportional to those sentiments. And so you could start to ask yourself questions like, well, what's going on in Toronto? And rather than seeing quantified information, you could actually taste exactly what's going on in Toronto. I don't know why you'd want to, but no. Of course you'd want to. And so this is actually that dome experience that I described earlier. And so this is a big body of our work now, where we are creating these very multi-sensorial immersive environments. And the reason why we go after these multisensorial environments is that there's so much research today showing us how the different senses come together in order to create a unified eating experience or flavor experience. So we know what we see, what we hear, what we touch, what we smell, and what we taste are all inputs that come into the brain, but the output is a single experience and can be independently augmented by each of those senses. We run expos exploring the future of food and bringing people together. This was an expo in New York called Food Loves Tech we did last summer that really looked at everything from what is food to how we produce food to how we transform food and ultimately what the conceptual shifts are in food. And it's incredible to see communities building around these ideas all over the world. And Canada, being an agriculturally heavy country, really is so well positioned in order to push this field forward. And I hope there's exciting things to come from across the country. We also do pieces that are merely meant to delight and really just give people moments of wonder and awe that they can enjoy and just have a break from their day. And so one of those projects is this Museum of Ice Cream that we opened up last summer in New York City that really was a Willy Wonka's factory of sorts that went wild for Instagram, but really played with these notions of what are these edible experiences that we can have live. And so here you have some of the edible balloons that we were creating for that experience. I want to finish with this thought. We do all of our work, and we're very motivated in our work because we want to create these moments where people will think, that will trigger consciousness and intent around food. But every individual has a role in the future of food. And remember, it all starts with the mouth. Thank you.
So I actually wasn't referring to the dancing soup so much when I mentioned sound as a theory that I have that we all, I think, have experienced, which is we go into restaurants now and the noise is deafening. It doesn't matter which restaurant, it seems to be a disease endemic throughout the world of hospitality. And my view is, aside from the fact that you can't talk to the person next to you, is that it actually alters the taste. You cannot taste the food because the environment is so alive and so distracting. Have you done any research along those lines?
So that's a very, very real component of this field of cross-modalism that I was mentioning. So the way that sound impacts our food experience is very much associated with the pitch of the sound. And so we know that higher pitched frequencies are associated with sweeter foods, whereas lower pitched frequencies tend to be more bitter. And so you can run experimental studies where individuals will be exposed to different sound environments, and their perception of taste and flavor will be different solely based on that sound environment.
Well, that's fascinating. I prefer no sound environment. Some of you may know we've started this thing. It hasn't developed very much, but I really do intend to get back to it, called the Anti-Noise Pollution League. It's a registry related to our classical music radio station of all the places in town where you can actually hear yourself think or hear your dinner companion as they're talking to you. We're going to bring that list up to date. We list all the places that are either silent or just playing classical music quietly. I think it makes for a better meal. I think it makes for a better date, but really, it's a tough thing to find. I also have had the experience that once I began to talk about this, of course, many people have said, "Oh my God, yes, you're so right. I can't stand it anymore. I'm so glad you're bringing this up." And I would wonder if I could get you to do some actual practical research about how sound can also negatively impact on taste.
We love research, so it's the right place to come to.
Okay.
I was hoping to do a little demo with you.
Yes,
though.
you were going to give me a new taste thrill.
Yes. So what we have here are a couple of our edible clouds. These are a little bit prototypey, but they should work just fine if we set them up quickly. Okay, this one is
Got
here.
them working, 2 of them.
Okay.
Nice little lights.
So the edible clouds are created purely through a mechanical process. And so what we have in there is the equivalent of the gizmo you might find within a humidifier. It's just been slightly tuned in order to create a droplet size that will hang out. So it's not too big, so it won't just collapse and go back into the liquid base, but it's not too small that it'll just fly away. And so we can also flavor the clouds. I'm not going to show you what the flavors are, but you will try them and guess. So we have these two here. Great.
That was a scientific amount?
Yeah, very scientific right now. This is like my live science, everybody. Okay, let's see how this goes. So if I can offer you a
Beaker?
beaker.
No.
I feel like I should try it first to make sure that we're safe here. Okay, I'm gonna do a little taste test here. But you can see that we can pour the cloud, and obviously we have a draft right now. But we can,
Oh, where's that draft coming from?
we have a draft. I'll cheat it
Can
from
you-
the other
yeah,
side.
Pour
There we go.
this way.
And so, yeah, great. And so you can see you have the cloud there
Okay.
and sitting in the bottom.
And
And
stay there?
yeah, just be very gentle, and you can, whoa, it's flying away.
And
But you can
I'm
just sip on it
inhaling or
normally.
sipping?
You don't want to overdo it.
Well, I certainly got flavorful odor, but no liquid.
No liquid, exactly. So the idea is triggering those flavor olfactory neurons rather than your sense of taste. So do you have any idea what that one was?
Lemon?
Oh yeah, that was lemon.
Yeah.
And so we can do one more. Let's try it. We'll do this one standing.
So this might be a treatment for an alcoholic, for example.
I wish this, the $1 million gizmo right here. But there are interesting studies done in taste, smell.
Whoa.
Oh, that one's strong.
It is strong. It's more herbal. I couldn't identify it, though.
So that one was lavender.
Lavender, yes, of course. Yes.
So what's really cool is we can layer
You see, I
them.
didn't expect that I would be drinking lavender, so.
So what's really cool is we can layer them over other beverages, and then it augments the taste and the flavor of those beverages. But when you actually look at how this scales up to applicability in daily life, we know that there are a lot of patients who suffer dementia. And one of the first things they lose is their sense of taste and smell. And so there is a lot of research looking at like, hey, is it possible to control those effects through triggering memory through smell and taste? And so this is definitely, a step in that process of understanding how could we combat those effects.
How did you get the smoke in here in the first place?
Magic. Yeah. Such a
very
pleasure.
much, Irwin.
Thank you very much.
Now let's get our picture.
Oh.